Hi everyone, this is Isabella, and I'm going to be presenting on the role of eating disorders and nutrition for my nutrition class. So let's do a quick overview of the major eating disorders. We all probably are pretty familiar with at least the top two, anorexia, which is severe restriction tendencies, and bulimia, which is the binge purge cycle. And then binge eating disorder, especially in the last few years, has really become known as a major three as well. The biological and physiological factors of this, it's really important to understand. It's obviously complex. It has to do with genetics and neurotransmitters as well as societal pressures, especially for females, exist with males too, contributing to the onset and persistence of these conditions. A lot of it too can be passed down, genetically, but also epigenetically through like generational trauma in families too. The mental health impacts, both that drive these eating disorders and from these eating disorders, they really are significant. Unfortunately, they lead to depression and anxiety and all kind of play off of each other, and as well as OCD tendencies. And then, you know, part of the negative feedback loop here is the malnutrition that happens from any of these main three eating disorders can also exacerbate these issues further and increase risk of self-harm and substance use as maladaptive coping along with these disorders too. The physical consequences here, and this really pertains to our class, so I understand why it was one of the topics to choose from, is that eating disorders can also lead to really significant health challenges physically, which would include hormonal disruptions. So a lot of women who suffer from an eating disorder will lose their period or have really irregular cycles or develop PCOS, GI issues and fatigue, and also intensify that guilt shame cycle and just further negative feedback loop and complicating recovery, unfortunately. The social and emotional dimensions that we sort of mentioned getting more into here is that withdrawal and shame. So, obviously, huge part of our culture, depending on what you like to do and where you live. But I'd say overall is going out to eat with friends and just sort of being socially around food. And when someone's struggling in that way, it can really, really lead to social isolation and shame around food and nutrition, which can just exacerbate further and distort self perception, making recovery more challenging. It's very important for any practitioner who's handling anyone with an eating disorder to understand these emotional impacts, as it's vital for effective support and true healing. Kind of leading into the treatment and recovery here, effective recovery really focuses around cognitive behavioral therapy, known as CBT, when it comes to eating disorders. Ideally, family involvement, especially because of that generational trauma I mentioned can be passed down here, as well as dietitian and nutritionist support and rebuilding self-esteem for holistic healing and through exposure therapy too, if there's, or ERP, exposure and response therapy, if there's an OCD piece that's happening here and kind of causing and letting that eating disorder overrule. And I wanted to end on a statistic here, somewhat encouraging. 75% of individuals seek help early, which means they're taking early intervention. And this does significantly increase the chances of successful recovery, both physically and mentally, from eating disorders, demonstrating the importance of addressing these issues as soon as possible for both mental, physical, nutritional health outcomes. Thanks for listening.